First, in Yitro, there were the Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 utterances, the 10 general principles. And now in Mishpatim come the details. And here is how they begin. If you buy a Hebrew servant, he's to serve you for 6 years, but in the 7th year, he shall go free without paying anything. But if the servant declares, I love my master and my wife and children and don't want to go free, then his master must take him before the judges. He shall take him to the door or the doorpost and then pierce his ear with an awl. Then he will be his servant for life. Now, there's an obvious question here. Why begin with this particular law? There's 613 commandments in the Torah. Why does Mishpatim, the first full law code in the Torah, begin where it does? And the answer is equally obvious. The Israelites have just endured slavery in Egypt. There must be a reason why this happened, because God knew it was going to happen. Evidently, he intended it to happen centuries before. He'd already told Abraham it was going to happen. You remember the scene. As the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and fearful darkness came over him. Then the Lord said to him, know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be as strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated there. So it seems that this was the necessary first experience of the Israelites as a nation. From the very start of the human story, the God of freedom sought the free worship of free human beings, but one after another, people abused that freedom. First Adam and Eve, then Cain, then the generation of the flood, then the builders of Babel. So God began again, this time not with all humanity, but with one man, one woman, one family, who would become pioneers of freedom. But freedom is difficult. We each seek it for ourselves, but we deny it to others when their freedom conflicts with ours. So deeply is this true that within 3 generations of Abraham's children, Joseph's brothers were already willing to sell him into slavery. A tragedy that didn't end until Judah was prepared to forfeit his own freedom, that his brother Benjamin should go free. Now it took the collective experience of the Israelites, their deep, intimate, personal, backbreaking, bitter experience of slavery, a memory that they were commanded never to forget, to turn them into a people who would no longer turn their brothers and sisters into slaves, a people capable of constructing a free society, which is the hardest of all achievements in the human realm, even today. So it is no surprise that the first laws they were commanded after Sinai related to slavery. It would have been a surprise had they been about anything else. But now comes the real question. If God doesn't want slavery, if he regards it as an affront to the human condition, why did he not abolish it immediately? Why did he allow it to continue, albeit in a restricted and regulated way? Is it conceivable that God, who can produce water from a rock, manna from heaven, turn the sea into dry land, cannot change human behavior? Are there areas where the all-powerful is, so to speak, powerless? Well, it's interesting. In 2008, economist Richard Thaler and law professor Cass Sunstein published a fascinating book that made political waves. It was called Nudge. In it, they addressed a fundamental problem in the logic of freedom. On the one hand, freedom depends on a government not over-legislating. It means creating space within which people have the right to choose for themselves. But on the other hand, we know that people will not always make the right choices. The old model, for instance, on which classical economics was based, that left to themselves people will make rational choices, turns out not to be true at all. We're deeply irrational, a discovery to which several Jewish academics made major contributions. Psychologists Solomon Asch and Stanley Milgram showed how much we're influenced by the desire to conform, even when we know that other people have got it wrong. The Israeli economists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky showed how, even when making economic decisions, we frequently miscalculate their effects and we fail to recognize our motivations. And for that, Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize. How then do you stop people doing harmful, irrational things without taking away their freedom? Thaler and Sunstein's answer is that there are bleak ways in which you can influence people, you can nudge people. In a cafeteria, for example, you can put healthy food at eye level and junk food in more inaccessible and less noticeable places. You can subtly adjust what they call people's choice architecture. And that's exactly what God does in the case of slavery. He doesn't abolish it, but he so circumscribes it that he sets in motion a process that will foreseeably, even if it'll take many centuries, lead people to abolish slavery of their own accord. So a Hebrew slave is to go free after 6 years. If he's grown so used to his condition that he wants not to go free, then he is forced to undergo a stigmatizing ceremony, having his ear pierced, which thereafter remains as a visible sign of shame. Every Shabbat, slaves cannot be forced to work. All these stipulations have the effect of turning slavery from a lifelong fate into a temporary condition, and one that is perceived to be a humiliation rather than something natural and indelibly written into the human script. Why choose this way of doing things? Because people must freely choose to abolish slavery if they are to be free at all. It took the reign of terror after the French Revolution to show how wrong Rousseau was when he wrote in the social contract that if necessary, people have to be forced to be free. You cannot force people to be free. It's contradiction in terms. And it led, to quote the famous title of J.L. Talmon's book about the French Revolution, to totalitarian democracy. God can change nature, says Maimonides. That's easy. But he cannot or will not change human nature, precisely because Judaism is built on the principle of human freedom. So God cannot abolish slavery overnight. He could change our choice architecture, or, in other words, give us a nudge, signaling that slavery is wrong, but that we must be the ones to abolish it in our own time, through our own understanding. It took a very long time indeed, and in America not without a civil war, but it happened. There are some issues on which God gives us a nudge. The rest is up to us. Shabbat Shalom.